comrade brothers who are here with me. And also to say that, every time I open my mouth in Portland, I end up on the right-wing video page, so I wore this shirt for you all today. And I want to say that in terms of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, we are an independent, mass, political, pan-African party that is based in Africa. We are based in West Africa. Our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define as the total liberation and unification of Africa under one scientific socialist government. And that is our work. We have chapters throughout the African continent, in Europe, in Canada, the Caribbean, and throughout the United Snakes of America. And our work is at this stage, is in the political education of African communities around the necessity for revolution. We are not Americans, we're prisoners of war in America. Our objective is to destroy the U.S. capitalist system, destroy the international capitalist imperialist network, and to replace it with a system that places people above profit. And we, although we are African nationalists, we work with anybody who is committed to creating a just world. And we have solid, if you look at it, we have solid relationships with people like the Irish Republican Socialist Party, tight comrades with them, the American Indian Movement, all of these types of organizations. So we work with all types of people, the Palestinian movement, long history of that. So that's pretty much gives you a nutshell who we are. You can get more information at aaprporegon.org. I moved here. We've established a chapter here in Oregon that has never happened before. We have a number of people who are participating, and we are organizing to engage in a process of political work in this state. It's going to be something a lot different than what people here are used to. But I think that leads into this question. Before I say anything, I have to acknowledge, Sasha mentioned Kwame Ture, or who was known as Stokely Carmichael, and today is his born day. And everything we do, we always recognize our ancestors. So we always recognize, definitely want to talk for a moment about Brother KT, because most people don't know a whole lot about him, and a lot of what's written about him is very fallacious. So it should be said that this was a brother who I spent a lot of time with. I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with him. But you have to understand, if you go back to 1966 when he yelled out Black Power, he was public enemy number, Osama bin Laden had nothing on Kwame. He was public enemy number one in this society. When Edward Brooke, who was the first so-called African senator to be elected in 1966 in Massachusetts, when he won, his campaign slogan was, "A vote for me is a vote against Stokely Carmichael." That was his campaign slogan, and white people responded to that in mega drones, and this man was elected by a landslide. Lyndon Johnson, when they crafted COINTELPRO, a lot of people talk about COINTELPRO. When they crafted COINTELPRO, they talked about, Kwame was one of the people they named in the eliminating black extremists, and that whole document that J. Edgar Hoover created, right? Kwame was one of the people they named that they wanted to target. And when I was with him here in this country, and even in Guinea in West Africa, they were still following him in the 90s, still trying to harass his family, still trying to do that. This is a brother who could have been, if he had sold out, president of any major university here, as his contemporaries were. You look at people like John Lewis and Jesse Jackson, look at what they're doing. He could have been above any of them, and he chose to move away from all that and dedicate his life to revolution. I saw where he lived. I saw what he did. And, he had nothing. His whole life was about building this party. So every day I wake up, I think of him and think of his sacrifice and how I can continue to make that contribution. So I can't do anything without talking about people like that, who are the very reason that I'm sitting up here today. So this topic that we're assigned to talk about, you all should know what was just mentioned in terms of Tom Metzger, the white supremacist. He was also one of the founders of the Aryan Brotherhood in California. And that history, unfortunately, is a long history. If you go back to the 1920s, when Marcus Garvey's movement was big, the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Marcus Garvey met with the Ku Klux Klan, and they had an objective of negotiating something. And if you go to the early 1960s, the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X, went to Alabama and met with the Ku Klux Klan. There's a long history of that. And even in 2008, Tom Mesker spoke at the National New Black Panther Party convention. That was just a few short years ago. So there is a lot of confusion with this, and we come to try to clarify it. And we work with all those organizations, and we try to clarify with them the correct path. But we have to be honest when we do it, because a lot of people talk about white supremacy and they think of the neo-Nazi movement. And for us, a lot of times, y'all, honestly, it's hard for us to see a big difference between what you would call white supremacist movement and a lot of white activists, so-called revolutionary white people. It's hard for us to see the difference between those two elements. In fact, sometimes I would say there really is no difference. And what I mean by that is we would suggest to you all to consider this. One of the main questions that has to be addressed is, in our view, on this question of nationalism, is this whole thing of American identity. American identity. We would argue that if you call yourself an American, you're a white supremacist. Because you can't be an American and separate that from what America stands for. You can't do it. There's no way to do it. If you call yourself an American and you identify in any way with that type of identity, on some level, you are identifying with the subjugation of people that look like us, with even the subjugation of poor white people, with the theft of land, and with the continued domination of the world's human and material resources. And so what we suggest is that instead of that, and we can't tell you what you need to do, but we would say two things. One, that people who are white or European or however you identify it, have to come together and create an identity that's based on the masses of working people in this world and what's best for this planet. And that's all you need to identify with. And to link up with people like us who are engaged in that same struggle and do away with this American identity. We're having 4th of July this Friday. We can't celebrate no 4th of July. I mean, did y'all flunk math or something? We can't celebrate 4th of July. This is the 4th of July. We come together Friday at Peninsula Park. We do it every year, and we're talking about liberation and all that. We can't identify with none of these days that these people, the only reason why they have them is to get you to be committed to white supremacy. That's why they have all the holidays of propaganda tools to get you to do that. And you can say all you want, well, I just meet with my family at Thanksgiving. I just go and meet with my family. You are contributing and participating in the ideological hegemony of white supremacy when you do that. That's what you're doing. So we don't do any of that. I got a 27-year-old daughter. She wasn't raised doing none of that nonsense. We don't celebrate none of it. And she's a school teacher in California, and she's in trouble right now because she refuses to do the Pledge of Allegiance. She tells her kids, you do what you want for these few minutes. I'm leaving. I'll be back, and then we'll have some. We're not Americans, we ain't Americans. So that's what we have to do. So that's what you all have to consider, because this is not really a problem for us as African people. It's not really, we got some people that are confused. But for the most part, we don't have people in our families watching Fox News, and we don't have that. We don't have that problem. I mean, people are not confused like that. Like, there was a video a couple of years ago of this brother. He was an NBA player. Can't remember his name. I can't remember the brother's name. Josh Howard, that's his name. You can look it up on YouTube. And what Josh Howard was doing, he was at some college football, I guess the college he went to, with some of his guys, some of his boys there, and they were clowning around for the video camera. And the national anthem was playing in the background, and he says into the camera, "Yeah, that's that national anthem. Black people, we don't do that shit." And that's what he said. And he got in big trouble because he's an NBA player. But I mean, for us, it's like, yeah, we don't. I mean, when 9/11 happened, you didn't see no American flags in our. We don't do that. And if you look at any protests we have, you don't see that. We don't have any. We're not. We understand. Even the most. We were yesterday passing out 4th of July flyers at Good in the Hood, right? And everybody we talked to, we like, July 4th, and nobody was like, yes, it is. Everybody's like, yeah, we know that. You know, I mean, and these aren't movement people. These are everyday community people in Portland, but people understand that. Yeah. And so what I'm saying is that when you go to the white community, you don't see that level of consistency. And this is the problem. And this is even like if you look at some of the issues, like there's a lot of talk about, for example, homophobia in the African community. And my position is that my people, look, we have suffered tremendous trauma. So we understand suffering. We are not against any people. But what people are against, and this is the problem, is that I watched the same-sex, when the announcement came about same-sex marriage being legal here in Oregon. And the gentleman that came as a spokesperson, he said, well, this is an example of what America looks like when it does what it's supposed to do. And I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? You know, America's never, I mean, I'm glad you got this today, but America's never been about this. But the fact that he could see it like that, this is what rankles African people. When you talk about a movement for justice, and your movement for justice is based on this American thing, and America being this society that can be just, and then you're trying to identify with our suffering, you can't do that. And you can't expect us to relate to you when you do that. And that's what African people are against when you talk about this question of LGBTQ. And until the LGBTQ community addresses that, this is going to be a problem. It can't just be solved by calling us homophobic, because I'm not homophobic, but I am against people who stand on the backs of the suffering of my people instead of saying, look, what should have been said is that this is a great accomplishment today, but America is still an unjust society. That's what needs to be said. And when that kind of thing is being said, then I guarantee you won't have any problem out of African people, because that's what we want to hear. We don't see any army of white people saying that. And this is the problem. This is an uncomfortable conversation, but I'm sorry, y'all, this is what I came here to say to you, you know, because this is what needs to be said. So the last thing about that is, Sasha mentioned I organize in rural communities. I work, my day job, my day wage slave job is as a union organizer, a labor union organizer. So yes, I do organize in rural communities. Most of the people I organize here in Oregon are y'all probably don't even know where this town Condon is. This is the last thing I'll say. But I go to places like this. Anybody been to Condon in here? Anybody been there? It's way out. I can't even tell you how to get there. It's way out, like 4 hours from here. And it was a trip, because when I went there, I went on a Sunday, and I went into the town, right? And there was